War. War never changes.
So Fallout is a mad series. It's set up in this post-apocalyptic wasteland, this alternate timeline with kind of 40s/50s vibes. And every Fallout from the first all the way up until 76, that is just a naming convention by the way, there's not actually 76 Fallouts, that would be insane, was loved in its own special way. The early ones feel more like a puzzle/story game and focus quite heavily on individual choices and on getting things done by a certain amount of time, in the right order, etc. And the later ones I think focus more on exploration, kind of throwing you down into this huge world with tons of characters and tons of quests, and giving you the freedom to just explore anywhere you want and have fun doing it. And one thing that I think really defines the Fallout series is that each game has a ton of hidden references and Easter eggs and inside jokes and creative humor and callbacks to either other Fallout games or other games that these studios have made, or references to other games or movies or TV shows that they haven't made. Stuff like BioShock and Mad Max. This Iceberg list is, in my opinion, one of the best ones ever made for Fallout. It covers Easter eggs, a load of cut content, secret character connections, cool and interesting parts of the game, theories about the game and the characters and the stories that range from honestly quite wild and speculative to really very likely true. And in case you don't know what an iceberg is, it's basically this list that goes from the most well-known and simple at the top all the way down to the darkest, most obscure, less well-known items at the bottom. So without further ado, grab a drink. My choice today is the closest thing to Nuka-Cola that I could find. Slightly radioactive, and join me as we explore the ultimate Fallout iceberg. A quick thank you to all my Patreon supporters: Kelly Scott, Paper Shades, Ash M, Foxy Nico, and Stacy Stark. And if you'd like to tip a tea or coffee or see these videos a few days early, there are links to that and the Patreon down in the description below. But for now, let's get into the first tier: well-known Easter eggs and references. Wild Wasteland Easter eggs. So in Fallout New Vegas, the Wild Wasteland trait adds some unique, interesting, often quite hilarious bonus content as you go through the game. When you select this trait and play through the game, there are a bunch of bonus areas or encounters unlocked or changed in some way to make the playthrough more challenging or more unique or more fun. These include certain cultural references, like finding a dead Indiana Jones inside of a fridge, or encountering the Hell's Grannies from Monty Python, as well as stuff like a mercenary camp is replaced with a crashed alien UFO, complete with actual aliens and special alien weapons. There are a total of 15 different encounters and changes that the perk makes, and they're all pretty fun and creative to experience. So yeah, just a nice light one to start off with, and definitely a fun and worthy perk to take. Plunger Room. So this is a room in an unmarked bunker in Fallout 3. Pretty hard to find and kind of out of the way, but as the name suggests, it is a room entirely filled with plungers. They're stuck to the ceiling, to the floor, to the walls, just everywhere. There is also a ghoul in there just chilling, some mannequins, some blood, and a garden gnome pumped full of stimpaks and jets. There's nothing really important here, but it does make you wonder just what exactly led to this room in universe being filled with these plungers, not to mention everything else. Nobody really knows the story behind this room as the game didn't give us any clues, but it is a creepy one. Two Bears High-Fiving is a reference to the start of Fallout New Vegas. When you start the game, you're shown a bunch of inkblot tests that serve sort of like a psych test or psych exam. And one of the inkblots, as lots and lots of people have pointed out, looks like two bears high-fiving, which, I mean, it totally does. This answer, however, isn't available to select in-game unless you get a mod for it. And yes, there is a mod that just enables this option in-game, which is a bit of a useless one, but it was kind of funny. And in addition to this, developers added in a DLC an actual character in-game called Two Bears High-Fiving. But for this character to exist, you need the Wild Wasteland perk from our first entry. Fallout 1/2 Special Encounters. So in Fallout 1 and 2, you can have these special encounters encounters, which honestly are quite similar and probably inspired the Wild Wasteland perk from later games. These range from finding a crashed UFO with a Velvet Elvis painting on one of the aliens, to a herd of cows that just wander around you and actually say the words moo and moo I say, very sophisticated cows, to a giant's footprint. That'll make Wendigoon extremely happy. To the literal TARDIS from Doctor Who. There are a few more, but these all occur randomly in the middle of the desert, and the odds of them appearing is based on the player's luck. So, pretty cool. The Dunwich Borer Company. So this was a pre-war mining company that has these strange, eerie origins, lore. The name itself, Dunwich Borer Company, is a spin on the H.P. Lovecraft short story, The Dunwich Horror. And in Fallout 3 and 4, you can actually go to the company's headquarters and look around their building. The whole building is super strange and eerie, with hallucinations occurring, ghostly voices, random images, and stuff like a hidden altar with a bunch of ghouls around it, which is likely due to a reason we'll get into a little later on in the Iceberg. But this thing gives off massive Lovecraftian vibes, so if you're into that sort of thing, load up the game and go and check it out. Terminal bracketed lines. So in some of the later Fallout games, when you are hacking a terminal, a little known trick is that you can select these bracketed characters, which, if selected, then remove dud passwords or reset your try allowance, essentially helping you massively with the hacking process. This is not really explained to you in-game, but for those who don't know, it does help out a fair bit. Van Buren was the codename for the original Fallout 3 game. This was being developed by Black Isle Studios, who were the makers of Fallout 1 and 2 before they went bankrupt and were forced to shut down, which essentially cancelled the game and forced them to later sell the rights to Fallout to Bethesda. Van Buren was planned to be based in California, but it was never finished or released, though it did inspire a bunch of content and styles in Fallout New Vegas, which was made by a company called Obsidian, which is basically the same team that was at Black Isle Studios, but after they went bankrupt, everyone just basically moved and started a new company, and this was Obsidian Studios. So it's just kind of funny that they planned to make Fallout 3 in California. Bethesda got their hands on it, made the actual Fallout 3 in the capital, and then when Obsidian was put in charge of the interim game between Fallout 3 and 4, they kind of took a lot of their ideas from their old Fallout 3 game, as Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 are both based on the West Coast as well. And it's kind of funny how you have these two kind of main studios working on the Fallout games, where Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas, all basically made by Black Isle Studios, or at least the team behind that, and all on the West Coast. And then when Bethesda comes in, they make their games in Washington and Boston, both basically on the east side of America. In Shining Armor bug. So in Fallout New Vegas, the Shining Armor perk was intended to provide extra defenses against energy weapons, but due to a bug, it basically did nothing, making it completely useless, which is good to know, and unless you have the mod to restore its power, you should absolutely never ever take this perk. The New Plague, also known as the Blue Flu, was a pre-war biological weapon developed in the Fallout universe. It's actually mentioned in a few of the games, providing some interesting backstory, history, lore to the stuff that happened before the Great War and before the nuclear fallout. It was highly contagious, spread easily, and the government used the paranoia surrounding the plague to discourage assemblies, to fuel political ideologies and ideas, to register all of their citizens, and to advocate for isolation, saying that people should stay indoors, read books, and avoid ice cream socials, as they put it, which... honestly, why aren't ice cream socials a thing anymore? Hashtag normalize ice cream socials. No cure for the plague was found, however, only treatment measures, and it spread nationwide, killing as many as 200,000 people. But it is very important to the actual story of Fallout, as attempts to find a cure for the plague resulted in the US developing a virus called the Forced Evolutionary Virus, which, when humans are exposed to this virus, they actually end up becoming super mutants. And that is the story of of how super mutants are born. Vault 77. So in Fallout, you have these vaults or living quarters that were designed pre-war, so when the bombs dropped, everyone could go in and live happily ever after. There are ones like Vault 13 or Vault 101, which are the starting vaults for Fallout and Fallout 3 respectively. Then you have certain other vaults which are obviously experimental vaults. Not that the vaults are experimental, but that there are experiments taking place in these vaults. And a lot of them tend to be social experiments, some of which we will get into a bit later in the Iceberg. But for now, we are just going to cover Vault 77. So this vault was mentioned in a penny arcade comic book in Fallout 3, but it is canon, and this vault, as its occupants, had one man and a crate full of puppets. He was sealed inside the vault all alone, which he thought was a mistake. He was banging on the doors, he was screaming at them to let the other people in, but the doors didn't open, and he found himself sealed in this vault all alone, and soon found this crate full of puppets. He started playing with them, and predictably he went a bit mad with them, creating like names and personalities and even voices for them. Then after a while of this, having completely gone mad, he grabbed the king puppet and just ripped it apart, then accused the Vault Boy puppet of murdering the king. Then the Vault Boy puppet said to him that no, he had actually murdered the king. And afraid of what the dog puppet might do, he and the Vault Boy puppet found a way to open the doors, fled the vault, and escaped out into the wilderness. As the story goes, he then apparently became infamous among the raiders for just his sheer insanity and madness and brutality. Pretty wild and messed up vault and story, but this honestly isn't even close to the worst experiments that Vault-Tec has performed in and out of these vaults. Low intelligence dialogue are these honestly hilarious responses that you can give when you have really low intelligence in Fallout 1, 2, or New Vegas. When asked, are you a scientist or a soldier? The responses are stuff like me pet animals, I is scientist, or me shoulder. Yes, it says shoulder. And when asked what business you have here, one low intelligence response is need food, fill belly. I was honestly cracking up reading some of these, so if you want to check them out, I will leave the video to them in the description down below. Unseen vaults are these vaults or references to vaults that we never actually explore or see in game. The canon vault count goes up to at least 118, and we know of the surface level details of roughly 50 of them, which means there are at least 70 odd vaults that we know nothing about. And that's if there are only 118 vaults in the United States or in the world. There could honestly be thousands of these secret vaults all over the earth that we may never explore or find out about. The Fallout Bible is basically a collection of documents written by Chris Avalon, who was the designer for the early Fallout games. It compiles a ton of information, frequently asked questions, personal observations and ideas about the Fallout universe, about its history, about its lore. It was meant to kind of consolidate all the information about the Fallout universe in order to use for future Fallout games. But when the company went bankrupt, Fallout 3 got cancelled, the rights to Fallout got bought up by another company, the Fallout Bible that they had made basically became non-canon. So the stuff in the Bible isn't canon, at least not anymore, but it does give you a super interesting insight into their early ideas for the games and the universe, and might help you with the creative process of some of your own projects. Who knows? Silly voice-acted names. In Fallout 4, Codsworth, the player's robot butler, can actually recognize and say a huge range of chosen character names. Basically, you're asked for your name, you type in your name, and odds are the robot butler can actually say it. If you type in just absolute gibberish, then it'll just refer to you as something else, like sir or madame or whatever. But most of the time, if you type in a normal name, the game developers actually foresaw that and actually recorded the voice lines for that particular name. It really is quite impressive, but one of the funnier parts of this is that there are, in addition to the regular names that it's recorded, there's a ton of either references or not safe for work names that Codsworth is able to say.
Mr. Assface, Mr. Bastard, Mr. Cock, Mr. Fuck, Mr. Fucker, Mr. Fuckface.
It really goes to show the attention to detail, customizability, and the humor of the developers. And I think it's quite funny and adds a lot of depth to this part of the game. Blade Runner references. So Fallout honestly has a ton of references, which makes it super fun to go around and hunt them out and observe them, but makes it insanely fun if you just happen to stumble across them and you recognize them for the reference they are in the moment. Fallout 3 has a few references in their quest lines to Blade Runner, and Fallout 4 has a few more. There's the noodle selling robot Takahashi, who uses the exact same line as the noodle seller in Blade Runner, Nani ni shimashuka, and I have no idea if that was the correct pronunciation or not. If you couldn't tell, I can't speak Japanese. As well as that, there is a reenactment from a scene at the end of Blade Runner on top of this roof in Fallout 4 involving a deactivated synth. So, some pretty cool stuff, especially if you're a fan of both of the series. Mad Max inspirations. So, you could say the entire Fallout series is inspired by and based on Mad Max. The post-apocalyptic environment, the metal spikes, the leather clothes, and honestly just the pure insanity of some of the characters in the game. And you'd probably be right to some extent. It's hard not to become inspired by such a popular series in this genre, but there are some specific references to the Mad Max series in the form of some of the names that Codsworth the Butler from a few entries back is able to say. These include Furiosa, Goose, Toast, and Mudguts, which is a fun, nice little nod to perhaps some of Fallout's early inspirations. A slave obeys challenge. So in Fallout New Vegas, a slave obeys is a challenge that involves killing Mr. House with Neffy's golf driver or with a simple 9-iron, which is a nod to the video game BioShock, in which one of the bad guys is beaten to death with a golf club. Fallout 1 time limit. So in Fallout 1, you actually had a time limit to find the water chip and to save your vault, adding a certain sense of urgency to the gameplay. There is a 150-day time limit, at which point your vault runs out of water and you lose the game. But in the original patch, there was a 500-day time limit, which after this point, no matter what you did, super mutants would find your vault and kill everyone inside. This time limit meant that you couldn't just lollygag around, picking up spoons and fans and searching buildings and being over cucumbered all the time. You actually had to go out and complete the game. This obviously added a bunch of stress and urgency to the game, which some people liked, and some people thought it ruined the exploration side of Fallout, which was obviously heavily emphasized in later games, but the 500-day time limit was later patched to 13 years, meaning people could now spend an absurd amount of time chilling out in the radioactive wasteland. Broken Steel changing Fallout 3's ending. So in the original Fallout 3 ending, you had to basically sacrifice yourself in order to complete the game. So if you wanted to continue exploring, you had to basically save before the last mission, not complete the game, and do your exploring then. But with Broken Steel, the DLC actually allowed you to complete that mission and have the game not end, allowing you to explore the entire world after the last mission at your complete leisure, or leisure. Big Iron bug. In Fallout New Vegas, there was a bug associated with the Big Iron song from the in-game radio, where occasionally, randomly, the song would play like super loud and get stuck on an infinite loop. But honestly, it's a banger of a song, so incredibly loud and on an infinite loop should honestly probably be its default setting. And there was also another bug involving the song Stars of the Midnight Range, which didn't actually work in-game, and so whenever it was picked to play, it would just redirect to Big Iron, meaning Big Iron was actually played on the radio twice as often as any other song, which again, in my opinion, seems more like a feature than an actual bug. The post bar. So I'm honestly digging all of these Easter eggs. This one references a bar found in-game that has no occupants but is an exact replica of the bar from the 80s TV show Cheers. The show is set in Boston, the same city that Fallout 4 is set in, and the bar contains loads of skeletons dressed up as various characters from the TV show, as well as posters and other items referencing things from Cheers. And the name for the bar, the Post Bar, is actually German, Post, for cheers. Mentat's name origin. So Mentats, which is a drug in Fallout that boosts mental ability and acuity, is very likely named after the Mentats from Dune, who are these humans trained to have these superhuman computer-like abilities, mostly in mathematical and computational-like memory and ability. Another super cool reference of a super cool series. Tier 2, more obscure Easter eggs and facts and cut content. Jet Origins Retcon. So in Fallout 2 there was a drug called Jet, which was introduced as a drug invented after the Great War. But in Fallout 4, the origins of Jet become, it seems, retconned, saying that it was invented before the war. There are a few inconsistencies like this between the games, but I think that's to be expected when you have different studios working on different games in the same universe. But it is kind of frustrating if you are interested in the consistency of the lore, and it is a bit annoying for one game studio to basically ignore the in-game lore that another studio has made for the game. But it is what it is. Alien Blaster versus YCS-186. So earlier we mentioned the Wild Wasteland perk, which gives you in the game these strange, unique encounters. Well, one of these is the appearance of a strange alien spaceship, complete with a unique alien blaster. Well, this weapon doesn't come for free, as the spaceship actually replaces a mercenary camp, and in this mercenary is a mercenary holding the unique weapon YCS-186. So whether you take the Wild Wasteland perk or not, there is always one weapon you can get and one weapon you cannot get, which has obviously led people to discuss and debate which weapon is better. And from what I've read, they both seem to have their pros and cons. The Alien Blaster is more powerful, but has extremely limited ammo, and should be used as someone so beautifully described it in a forum post that I saw, a oh fuck button, when you're surrounded by like 3 Deathclaws or something. Whereas the YCS-186 is basically like an upgraded Gauss rifle. It has plenty of ammo, great damage, and is one of the best regular weapons in the entire game. But the weapon isn't everything, as I think you have to take into account the cool factor of experiencing this UFO crash, as well as all the other benefits and encounters that the perk gives you. So it's a tough one, but I would probably take the Alien Blaster. Brahmin tipping is a funny feature in all Fallout games, besides Fallout 4, that lets you tip or knock over a Brahmin, which are these 2-headed mutated cows. In Fallout 1, you can tip them over by giving them a beer, which is hilarious. In Fallout 2, there is a dedicated action to tipping them over. And in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, you can actually crouch next to them, hit a button, and watch them hilariously tumble to the ground. Completely useless, but completely hilarious. And honestly, for a game that is based in this horrific, dark, death-ridden, scary nuclear wasteland, it really does do its best to remain quite lighthearted and humorous. Joshua Graham quote misinterpretation. So Joshua Graham is a character in Fallout New Vegas who is known for his intense and philosophical quotes and dialogue. However, because some of the quotes sound just so deep, they are often mistakenly attributed to characters or people outside of the actual game. And it's hilarious to find someone think that they're actually quoting someone like Gandhi, when in fact they're actually quoting this Joshua Graham character from a Fallout video game. Child Killer Original Image. So in Fallout and Fallout 2, if you kill a child, you are labeled as a child killer, which massively affects how NPCs interact with you. The original icon that you got for this reputation was Vault Boy kicking a pregnant mother in the stomach, which is... yeah. It was later changed to Vault Boy running away from an angry mob, which is probably more appropriate, I'd say. Christine and Veronica were lovers. So these were 2 characters in New Vegas, who it is subtly, cryptically implied were actually once in a relationship. You can interact and have dialogue with both characters, and while it's never explicitly stated, if you piece together some of the clues and hints, you come to the conclusion that each of these people is who the other person is referring to. They're both lesbian, they were both in roughly the same area at the same time, both had connections to Father Elijah, and they both hinted that they left behind someone that they loved. This was all confirmed by the the game developers, so it is true and canon. But I do love that it's never actually confirmed in-game. All it does is give you clues and kind of hint at it, and it lets you figure it out for yourself. Gojira is this name given to this huge fire gecko, hidden inside the game files of Fallout New Vegas. This creature is not and cannot be encountered in normal gameplay, and was perhaps either a cancelled boss, a debugging tool, or just an Easter egg left in the game by the developers. And it should be noted that it has a HP value of 8,000, roughly 4 times that of the next strongest creature in the game, and has an ability called Gojira Flame, which deals 3,200 HP per second, essentially one-shotting anyone or anything, including the strongest characters or creatures in the game, which, of course, makes the Gojira the strongest creature in the game. Minefield and Snatcher. So in Fallout 3, the minefield is this area where players can encounter this character called Arkansas, who shoots at the player, at cars, at mines, if the player approaches the area too closely. And the names of the houses in the area, Gibson, Benson, and Gillian, actually reference characters from the game Snatcher. You can also find Gibson dead with a note nearby that reads "Search the house," which again is a reference to the game Snatcher. And now I'm coming to think that every single thing in the Fallout universe is just one big in-joke and reference to something else. I am not complaining. Fallout Shelter Online. So this is a expanded version of the mobile game Fallout Shelter, which was released mainly in Asian markets. It includes more features like PvP, guilds, and quite a wider range of characters. It is not strictly, for the most part, canon. It is just a bit of fun if you can't get enough of the Fallout universe. The Fallout 2 Hint Book. So this is a special in-game item that's given to you after you complete the final mission. It instantly gives you 10,000 HP and boosts all of your stats up to 300%, which is the max amount. And it can also be used an infinite amount of times. So it's basically just a way to give you max power in the game, so you can explore it and have fun at your own leisure, which I think is a genius idea. Hubology and Scientology. This refers to Hubology, which is a fictional religion in the Fallout universe, being widely regarded as a parody of Scientology. It has some wild beliefs and practices, and the name Hubology is likely a reference to the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. But that is purely speculation, and it is most likely a coincidence, as Scientology is known for being extremely litigious, and I would not like to get sued. So you know what? Scrap this entire entry. It is likely just propaganda peddled by giants. Pint-sized slasher is real. So in Fallout 3, the pint-sized slasher is basically this boogeyman used to scare kids into behaving. The slasher is described as a child wearing a specific set of clothes and wearing a clown mask. But there are theories that the pint-sized slasher in-game was actually a real killer. There are certain old reports you can find that actually hint at the real-life existence of this myth. One, for example, reads, "After reviewing the autopsy results of the Linden Street slayings, we have confirmed that the force and direction of every knife wound are consistent with an attack from a much smaller assailant. A child, to be precise." So, yeah, definitely some creepy stuff. Fallout 2 time limit. So, similar to the first Fallout game, Fallout 2 originally did have a time limit. But this was again later removed due to players just not enjoying the time limitations, I guess. And I say removed, but they did, as with Fallout 1, just change it to a 13-year time limit. And once that time limit is reached in-game, you simply get a "The End" screen, and you are kicked back to the main menu. Fallout 1 Super Mutant Ending. So in the original game, if you fail to stop the Master and his plan to turn everyone into super mutants, the game ends with a cutscene of you actually being transformed into a super mutant, and your home vault being invaded and everyone inside killed, with you yourself actually killing the Overseer, who was the guy that actually sent you out on your original mission, which is a pretty dark, strange ending. And yes, while things like ghouls came about from the nuclear radiation, these super mutants are actually all made from this forced evolutionary virus, which, if you remember, was a virus that was created in order to combat the new plague, but that obviously didn't work. As the name suggests, this virus basically forces your body to evolve. So when a human is exposed to this virus, it makes them taller, it makes them stronger and more muscular, it makes them more durable, it makes them immune to radiation, and basically makes them immortal. And it also doesn't necessarily make them more stupid, as in a lot of these early games, these super mutants retained most of the intelligence they had when they were a human, and in quite a few cases actually gained more intelligence. It is only over time, as the virus got more diluted and brought out west to the Fallout 3 and 4 games, where the inferior FEV has caused super mutants to basically be incredibly stupid. The FEV also does cause a few super interesting perks and traits in people and creatures that are exposed to it, but we'll get into those just a little further down in the iceberg. It does also make things like the super mutants infertile, meaning they can't actually breed and have to be created individually by exposing people to this virus. Well, that was a fun little super mutant history. Onwards. Eating baby Mary. Oh boy. So in Fallout 3 Point Lookout, there is this option you can choose as long as you have the cannibal perk that lets you eat a baby named Mary. This option was, in fact, just a Photoshop, which, thank God, it wasn't in the actual game, until someone made a mod for it, which is just... why? Teaming with Elijah. So in Fallout New Vegas, one of the potential endings for the game involves you teaming up with Father Elijah and using the Cloud, which is a deadly airborne toxin, as well as holograms to basically wipe out everyone and everything in the Mojave, while you and him sit back, watching, waiting for everyone to die. Pretty wild and evil outcome, but it is an option. Some birds are synths. So in Fallout 4, there is a popular theory that some birds in the game are actually synths made and sent out by the Institute. Although it is never explicitly stated or confirmed in the game, there are actually two models of crow in the game files. Crow being a regular crow, and crow synth, having red eyes and being immune to damage. There are also a bunch of images inside the Institute of the Commonwealth that look like they're from a bird's eye perspective, and often if you go to those certain areas, you will find crows just chilling, hanging around. So pretty creepy, just keep an eye out for them on your next playthrough, but try not to be too paranoid about them. They're always watching you and there's nothing you can do to stop them. The Federator is a unique, super overpowered weapon found in the game files of Fallout New Vegas. It's not accessible through normal gameplay and can only be acquired through console commands, so it was very likely just a weapon used to speed up test runs of the game and just blast through absolutely everything. It has huge damage, fire rate, unlimited ammo, high crit rate, and tons of knockback. So yeah, pretty OP. Cats in New Vegas and Fallout 4. So in previous Fallouts, cats are mentioned, but in Fallout New Vegas, it is stated that cats are now extinct. Pretty sad, you may now cry. But cats actually appear for the first time in the series in Fallout 4. So they live. Sorry I made you cry. That was a bit of a roller coaster. TES-04 telephone pole. In Fallout 3, you can find a telephone pole with a marking TES-04, which is a reference to the Elder Scrolls 4, which is obviously another great game made by Bethesda. Wrecked Highwayman Fallout 2 reference. So in Fallout New Vegas, there's this car wreckage, and the car in the wreckage is a Highwayman, which is the same car used by the playable character in Fallout 2. And upon finding the wreckage, the Gold Slouch track from Fallout 2 will start playing. So once again, this is just a cool little reference to some of their earlier stuff. Ron the Narrator. So this one is kind of wacky and wild to explain. And they did this thing quite a lot in-game, I guess either to overcome memory or technical limitations, where you experience something, say a cutscene with a video playing, but actually they just teleport your character to an empty room, play the video on the wall of the room, and have the narrator for the video as a character placed behind the video just saying their lines, so it sounds like the video is narrated. But you, of course, don't see any of this because during this time your entire HUD is removed, your character controls are completely removed, so you can't look around, you can't move, you can't do anything. So to you, it just looks like a video playing on your TV screen. Ron the narrator is one particular example of this, and he's a character in New Vegas that literally stands behind or next to the video playing and just narrates the whole thing. And the name Ron is a reference to Ron Perlman, who you might know from films such as Hellboy, who actually did a lot of the narration for the Fallout series, including the famous line,
War. War never changes.
Pop Rocks and Nuka-Cola. So this is a hilarious reference to a real-life myth that says that consuming stuff like Pop Rocks or Mentos with Coca-Cola could release enough bubbles to make a kid's stomach explode. This isn't true, but in Fallout 2, there was a cut item called Pop Rocks, where when you consumed these with Nuka-Cola, would just cause your character to explode, which is super funny and hilarious, and I'm really sad that it was cut. Tier 3. Well-known theories, cut content, and the most obscure Easter eggs. Basin Creek and Bethesda buildings. These are buildings and areas in-game that represent the real-life studios of the game developers, Obsidian and Bethesda. There are some inside jokes with the Obsidian office, with a car having crashed into the building, a huge ant infestation, and a flooded bathroom, all of which actually occurred in the old Obsidian office. Move in New Vegas end cutscene. So this one we mentioned a little bit earlier, and it's insane that they set it up like this. So we went over some of the cutscenes where you're basically just staring at this wall, but firstly you can use console commands to give control back to your character during these scenes, and that's how players discovered this in the first place, and it allows you to walk around the room and explore a little bit. There's basically nothing in the room, but you can do that. But there are also random glitches as well, where characters from the end of the game will get teleported into the room with you and just start walking around in front of this screen, basically breaking the entire illusion. So as I said, a pretty wild one, but it is pretty funny. 1-888-4 Vault-Tec. This is a real phone number that appears in Fallout 4. This shows up on a Vault-Tec calendar inside of one of the houses, and if you dial it, you get hit with a message thanking you for calling Vault-Tec and saying they are very busy right now and you are in a queue, and that queue has something ridiculous like an 8-year wait time. It's a pretty cool IRL Easter egg, but sadly the number is now disconnected, and calling it no longer works. Fallout 3 third person while baby. So in Fallout 3, when you start the game as a baby. It's kind of a funny, strange little scene. You learn to walk around, you get a little bit of exposition from some of the other characters, and then later on you grow up and you progress through the story. But during this baby scene, third person mode is actually disabled, and you can see why when you use console commands to re-enable third person mode, and this is what you see. Your model is not a baby. It is a tiny human being, which I guess that's what babies are, but this is a tiny, fully grown human being, which is just absurd, and I don't know why they didn't just make a baby model, you know, just in case someone went into third person. Maybe they didn't want to include that in the game, but it is kind of funny nonetheless. Child at Heart in New Vegas. So Child at Heart was a park in New Vegas that actually allowed you to have unique dialogue options when interacting with children, often leading to extra information or easier solutions to quests, and it would have been a pretty good perk if there had just been more children in New Vegas. But due to how infrequently you would have actually been able to utilize this perk, meaning it was a lot less useful than some of the other options for perks, this particular perk was eventually cut before the full game was released. Romance in New Vegas. So in New Vegas, you can fornicate with people, from male to female to ghoul to fucking robots. No, like literally fucking robots. It's a pleasure bot called Fisto, which I'm just going to leave that to your guys and gals' imagination. But after paying their money or completing a quest, some of the characters in-game will basically offer their services, which you can accept, and they may give you the well-rested status. So win-win. There were also some actual romance storylines and quests, like for instance marrying your companion Cass in New Vegas in a shotgun-style wedding, which I think would have been hilarious, but these were cut from the game for whatever reason, and so we're just left with romanceless passion, which is sad. Operation Anchorage is US propaganda. So in the Fallout 3 DLC, Operation Anchorage, you enter this simulation of a famous pre-war battle. The war in the universe really did happen, but the general who fought in the war heavily propagandized both the Americans, making them look braver and more powerful than they were, and the Chinese, showing them as comically stereotyped or more stupid and inept than they actually were. This comes off as kind of cheesy and fake and exaggerated in-game, and that's kind of because it's supposed to be. It's manipulated media that is basically propaganda, but they don't strictly tell you that in-game. 20 Leagues Under the Sea quest was a cut quest from Fallout 4, which would have involved underwater exploration and combat, which sounds awesome. There are references to this quest that can be found in some of the game files, and after discovering these, people were insanely curious, excited, maybe even disappointed at the potential loss of a super cool mechanic in Fallout, missing the potential exploration of Fallout's post-apocalyptic oceans, and of an underwater vault, Vault 120, involving, amongst other things, a giant sentient octopus. Honestly, would have been pretty cool. New Vegas was supposed to be bigger. Pretty self-explanatory. New Vegas originally had plans for a bigger map and for more content in the game, but Obsidian basically overestimated the amount of work that they could get done with certain time and budget and technological constraints, so many ideas for the game were either scaled back or just cut out completely. One piece of scaled back content was the strip, which in concept art was shown to be much bigger and grander, and it honestly makes you wonder what could have been. Sawyer's difficulty mod. So this one is kind of fun. Josh Sawyer, who was the project director of New Vegas, released a personal mod after the game's release. This mod adjusts various game mechanics, such as reducing your carrying weight, reducing your HP, moving the locations of various items and quests so that they make more sense, and just all round making for a more balanced and challenging experience, reflecting, as he said, the way he feels New Vegas could and should be played. Dennis Crocker Race Change. So in the New Vegas Collector's Edition, there was this deck of playing cards with characters on them, and one of these characters, Dennis Crocker, looked like this. As you can see, this man is white, but due to an apparent recording mix-up, where his lines were instead recorded by a black man, which I don't know how a mix-up like that even occurs, but his lines were recorded by a black voice actor, Emerson Brooks, and people thought that the voice didn't match up with the race of the character, and so they changed his in-game character to be black instead of white. Yeah, pretty wild story. Fallout GURPS. So this one is pretty interesting. GURPS, which stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System, was basically this system kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, where you could build characters and worlds and stories and quests using this system, and it didn't really limit you to any setting or scenario or genre. Like, you could use these rules and stats and settings and system for a medieval game, a space game, or even a post-apocalyptic Fallout game. And this was actually the original plan for Fallout. It was originally called Vault 13, a GURPS post-nuclear adventure, then transitioned to Fallout, a GURPS post-nuclear adventure, and then after some disagreements between Interplay, who made Fallout, and the owner of GURPS, this collaboration basically ended up falling through, and Fallout went their own way, made their own stat system through the special system that we use today, and just named their game Fallout. It's kind of mad to think how different Fallout might have been if this collaboration went through, but I think it was probably for the best, although we'll never really know what a Fallout GURPS game would have looked like, but it probably likely would have been fairly similar to the actual games that ended up coming out. But who knows? There is a pretty cool article to this whole story that explains and kind of showcases a bunch of the early GURPS Fallout stuff, which is honestly a pretty cool read if you want to check it out. Stealth Boy side effects. So the Stealth Boy is this device that basically makes you invisible, but it is revealed that prolonged use of the Stealth Boy basically drives you insane, inducing paranoia and schizophrenia and anxiety and heightened aggression. But for some reason, this only affects other people and other creatures in-game, and your player character never actually suffers any bad side effects. When you activate it, you do lose everyone else around you, but in the process, you also lose yourself. That was deep. Tool art in Fallout 1 and 2. So this just refers to a bunch of visuals and artwork found in the first 2 Fallout games that seem to represent, it's not like an official collaboration or anything, they seem to represent a few of the album covers from the band Tool, which is a fantastic band, by the way, and I would recommend checking out Tempest by them if you want a banger. Fat Man Bell. So this is a fat man. It is basically a bomb launcher. Pretty cool and pretty deadly. It just makes everything blown to smithereens. But whenever you fire it, there is a little bell sound that plays. And this bell sound is actually the sound of the lunchroom bell at the real-life Bethesda offices. So yeah, pretty cool, and it might be somewhat traumatic to people if you're used to the in-game bell representing this huge explosion, and then you're just chilling there at lunch and you hear that same little Pavlov's bell. Might have caused a little bit of trauma. The mannequin killers. So in Fallout 3 and 4, there are a few scenes all around the game where mannequins are positioned in these eerie and somewhat suspicious poses. A skeleton in a bathtub surrounded by these threatening mannequins, a man in the woods with his legs chopped off, and a mannequin standing next to him wielding a machete. Theories for these strange scenes range from a serial killer having a bit of dark fun, setting up these mannequins to look like they killed the person, to synths disguising themselves as mannequins, which is pretty creepy, to sentient mannequins, which is also pretty creepy. And who knows? It is pretty weird though. The Ghoul Whale. The Ghoul Whale is a mythical creature mentioned in Fallout 4, known as Old Peg. According to the in-game lines and rumors, it is this massive, irradiated, giant blue whale that is roaming the seas off the Boston Harbor. And this is actually one of the only times where a creature is referred to as a ghoul rather than a human. Other things are described as being mutated, but not necessarily ghoulified, which raises the obvious question, what exactly makes something a ghoul, as opposed to just being mutated? And although we never actually see Old Peg, just thinking about it all giant and ghouly, swimming around there in the darkest, deepest, most terrifying place in the world, the ocean, still kind of freaks me out a little bit. The Shosha in Tactics. So this is the hilarious reference to the real-life weapon, the French-made Shosha light machine gun, infamously known for being just a terrible weapon, jamming all the time, and just being all-round super unreliable. So in Fallout Tactics, they actually added this gun into the game that is honestly as useless as its real-life counterpart. And its description reads as being the worst machine gun ever issued to any army at any time in history, which is probably fair. Tim Kaine Boom. So in Fallout 1, you can find this particular Easter egg by typing in boom during the credits. And when you do, an image of Tim Kaine, a lead programmer and designer for the game, will appear and his head will subsequently explode. Awesome. Tier 4. More cut content and weird facts. Fallout 3 Cryolator. So the Cryolator is a unique weapon found in Fallout 4, which basically freezes your enemies. Pretty cool weapon, pretty chill weapon. But interestingly enough, its design is actually based on a concept from Fallout 3. This was basically the cryolator that is in Fallout 4, but it was cut from the final game. It was going to be like a crafted weapon, as within the game files there were junk items that were also cut, such as a coolant component and a liquid nitrogen canister, which probably would have been used as ammo, and they both used the same graphical texture as the cryolator. So it was very, very likely planned to be released actually in Fallout 3, but for some reason it was cut and then just released in Fallout 4. Riding Liberty Prime. So Liberty Prime is this giant military robot that was fixed into working order at the end of Fallout 3. And it was pretty epic. But the game developers revealed that they originally planned for the player to actually be able to ride inside the head of Liberty Prime, which would have been absolutely epic. But sadly, that's not how it was, as in the final game, Liberty Prime just kind of storms through everything as you follow next to it and shoot things as well, which is not quite as fun. And there is also, as with many other things, a mod that you can download to actually play as Liberty Prime, but it's not really the same. Kaga, the Chosen One rival. So Kaga was this cut character from Fallout 2, who was intended to be a recurring rival for the character that you play as, the Chosen One. He was actually once a former Chosen One who failed on his mission and now blames you for basically everything. So you encounter him multiple times, he starts fights with you, and he basically just wants to destroy you and the settlement. Well, he would have, if he wasn't cut from the game. The New Plague in Van Buren. So the New Plague, which we explored earlier in this Iceberg, was a biological weapon developed by the US in order to use against China. But China ended up getting a hold of it and releasing it, and yeah, madness ensued, and the rest is history. But the New Plague was said to have a much bigger role in the Van Buren game, which again was just the code word for the Fallout 3 game that Black Isle Studios was making, or at least planning. One of the antagonists in the game was planned to deliberately infect a bunch of communities with this plague, and try and convince this AI that the only way to save America, now that everyone was infected with this, was to essentially start a second nuclear war and a new apocalypse. This potential plot seemed pretty wild and honestly quite interesting, but Black Isle Studios went bankrupt and Fallout 3 was put on hold for like 10 years, and obviously eventually made by a completely different studio with a different story, and it's basically just a different game. So none of that ever happened. Original Mr. House face. So in New Vegas, one of the main characters is called Mr. House, and he's basically just a computer with a face. But the earlier version of Mr. House was actually changed to the current one that we all know of, because they said the earlier face looked a little too menacing and creepy, which I kind of agree. John Eden and Bill Clinton. So President John Henry Eden in Fallout 3 was actually planned to be voiced by former President Bill Clinton. They ended up not going through with this, which was probably for the best, but it still would have been pretty wild if it actually happened. Broken Steel Metro Headman. So in the Fallout 3 DLC Broken Steel, there was this train that, well, instead of being programmed as an actual train, was literally just a character with a train for their head, running along the tracks really, really fast. I shit you not. These developers were insane. Mart's Mutant Mod in New Vegas. So Mart's Mutant Mod is a quite popular mod for Fallout 3 that adds a ton of variety to the game's creatures and NPCs, and it is possible to port this mod to New Vegas, although it's not the easiest thing to find or to do. It does give a ton of variety to the creatures and characters in-game though. Gecko in a can. So as a promotional item at the Fallout 2 launch party, these little geckos in a can were given out. They are just cans fully detailed with ingredient lists, suggested servings, everything. And when opened, there is just a gecko plushie. Very cute. These are extremely rare, and they're even more rare if the can hasn't been opened yet. I tried to look around for someone actually selling one of these, but I couldn't find them anywhere. And as a bonus fact, these were actually planned to be dog meat in a can, with a dog plushie inside of them. But the only dog plushies they could find had little red ribbons on, which they thought didn't really match the aesthetic of Fallout. So they ended up going with the geckos instead. New Vegas Medical History Test. So this is a reference to some cut files and dialogue from New Vegas, where the player was able to pick some of their traits in the format of a medical history list. Pretty innovative, and it showed some cut traits as well, such as getting cheap items for less, but getting expensive items for even more, and moving faster while crouching, but taking longer to get into a crouching position, which seem like some pretty interesting perks, but outside of a mod, we'll probably never experience them. Scorpion and Spider Rifles were both weapons cut from New Vegas, being found only in the game files. There isn't too much known about these weapons, but there is a mod for New Vegas which reintroduces these weapons back into the game. They were built with schematics, and the Scorpion Rifle would fire out these tiny robotic scorpions that fired lasers at people. Pretty cool. And the Spider Rifle would fire out these spider mines. Also pretty cool. Ray, the super mutant. Ray was this freshly evolved super mutant in Fallout 1 who would experience these feelings of sorrow, of loneliness, of depression, and would be constantly troubled about these vague memories from his recent human life. Through dialogue, you were actually able to eventually convince Ray to kill the Master and possibly become a companion of the player. It's pretty depressing and sad, but that's maybe why it was cut. But I do really like how they at least attempted to show some of the dark realism behind the idea of converting these humans into something like a super mutant. But as I said, Ray was cut and we don't really know why. New Vegas doggy treat. So these are these rare items that you can find in New Vegas called doggy treats. There's only 2 of them in game and they look a little bit suspect, and you can't actually feed them to Rex or to any other dogs for that matter. So they're basically useless. But the game code kind of implies that if you were to feed one of these to a dog, that they would be knocked unconscious, but then they don't allow us to do it. So what the hell? Betsy the Brahmin was a Brahmin companion that was going to be in New Vegas until it was obviously cut from the game. The idea with most companions is that they travel around with you, they fight with you, they shoot enemies that you're shooting at sort of thing. They're kind of like a helping hand. But with Betsy, she would have low HP, not be able to fight, basically run away when fighting actually started, but she would have a huge carrying capacity. So she was basically like a pack mule companion. But her purpose was to carry a metric fuckton of items, or since this is America, an imperial fuckton of items, which seems like a pretty useful idea and companion, and I'm not too sure why it was cut. Maybe because the use cases for this type of companion would have been very slim and rare, but who knows? Craps in New Vegas. So this one is kind of whack. In Fallout 2, there are crap tables where you can actually play craps. This is craps as in gambling, by the way, not craps as in... yeah. But in New Vegas, you know, the gambling capital of America, basically, you're not actually able to play craps. There are craps tables that you can go to and even cut audio files from the game that hint that the audio is specifically for craps dice rolls, but you can't actually ever play craps. And once again, it seems like there was a ton of cut content in this game, which ended up with New Vegas being a lot smaller and less epic than it maybe could have been. Consumable Brain was a cut item from Fallout 4 that was literally a brain that you could consume. It would give you +2 intelligence and -1 endurance for some reason, and that is probably as far as we need to go on that one. Gary Interrogation Log. So this one involves one of the experimental vaults that I mentioned earlier up in the Iceberg. In Vault 108, there were these experiments into cloning done, where one of the vault dwellers, Gary, was cloned 54 times, with each clone apparently getting more and more violent and aggressive. Eventually, the Gary clones basically took over the entire vault and overthrew and killed all of the scientists, and you can actually visit the vault and fight all of these Garys in-game. They mostly just use their own name when they speak, with slightly different inflections and lines.
Haha, Gary! 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 Aw, Gary.
Which is pretty fucking creepy and a little bit funny. And there was one Gary, Gary 23, who was actually kidnapped by an Outcast member and interrogated. The interrogation went bad, this Gary ended up being killed, and the whole thing was recorded on this log that was cut from the game. You can find the room in which Gary was interrogated, you can find his body with a missing arm, so this room is probably where the interrogation log would have been found, but it was removed. And I'm not really sure why. But at least we still have like 50 more Garys. Weed in Fallout 2. So in the original Fallout as well as Fallout 2, there were plans to include weed as a drug in some form or another. And I mean, you can smoke cigarettes and take jet, whatever that is. So why was weed cut from the game? Well, in the original Fallout game, it was completely cut from the game. Like, cut. But in later Fallouts, there are actually mentions of it, with people asking for it or discussing it, but it never actually appears in the game. Maybe it was cut for censorship reasons, maybe for lore reasons, who really knows. Obsidian was limited to 10,000 lines in the New Vegas DLC. So this one is kind of as wild as it sounds. Obsidian, for once again, likely self-imposed reasons and timeframes, basically limited itself to 10,000 lines of dialogue between all 4 of the New Vegas DLCs. And 10,000 might sound like a lot, 10,000, big number, but that's only 2,500 per DLC, and these were large worlds with many, many different characters, quests, dialogue options, and it just seemed like an absurd limitation that a lot of people say limited the narrative of the story of the game, but others, probably Obsidian themselves, would say that it showed how creative and innovative they could be. But as is a theme with a lot of items on this iceberg, it just feels like Obsidian probably bit off more than they could chew once again, and the game just suffered as a result. Tier 5. Bigger cut content. Races, quests, companions, and endings. Ulysses as a companion. So in Fallout New Vegas, Ulysses is a pretty well-known antagonist, but originally there were plans for the player to actually be able to win Ulysses over and recruit him as a companion, which would have been pretty cool. But alas, there seemed to actually be much bigger plans for Ulysses than what we ended up actually getting. He had a ton of lines of dialogue that were cut, and he was apparently going to help really flesh out the Legion and explain a lot of their backstory, but I guess they just ran out of space, so they decided to cut it all. Fiends as a faction. So in Fallout New Vegas, the Fiends are a group of people that are just constantly hopped up on drugs and high, hence the name Fiends. But looking into some of the dialogue that was cut from the game kind of suggests that at one point in development, you were actually able to potentially talk to some of the leaders of the Fiends and win them over and make them non-hostile, or even become a Fiend yourself and join them as a faction. But no other evidence outside of these cut pieces of dialogue suggests this, so we'll likely never know. Rotface cut questline. So Rotface is this homeless character in Fallout New Vegas that has this hidden quest. You basically go up to him, talk to him, give him some caps, and he tells you a bunch of gossip from around town. He had 30 lines of gossip, and if you give him enough bottle caps, he'll eventually buy a hat, raise his prices, and that's basically it. So tiny mini quest. It's fun if you liked a bit of this gossip or wanted to get a little more lore into the characters in the universe. But originally Obsidian had planned a much larger and longer quest for Rotface, where as in the released version you listen to him, give him bottle caps, hear his gossip, but he would eventually buy a hat, eventually buy a suit, eventually potentially buy a gun, and depending on your responses while talking to him, there was 4 quite different potential outcomes for the quest and for Rotface. Apparently it was a pretty complex little quest that was fully mapped out, planned, had dialogue written for it, and had lines recorded, but it simply wasn't able to be finished in time, and so it was cut from the final game. The Followers of the Apocalypse Impossible Good Ending. So this refers to the Followers of the Apocalypse in Fallout 1. No matter what you do in-game, the Followers will always be destroyed by a spy from within the cathedral, and this is due to an oversight by the developers, where they cut a quest from the game in which you go to the cathedral and are able to figure out and find the spy before they end up destroying the cathedral. But since this was removed, there is no way to stop the spy, and so the followers are destroyed every single time. And also, as if that wasn't bad enough, if you install the mod that we mentioned earlier that introduces a timer after which various settlements are destroyed by these super mutants, the followers are once again completely screwed over, as they are actually the first settlement on the list, meaning after just 90 days, the super mutants invade and kill everyone at the cathedral. And with it being basically impossible to finish the game within 90 days, they are once again always completely screwed. Fallout 1 Refusal Ending. So this one is fucking hilarious. In the first Fallout game, you can actually refuse the initial mission to go out into the wasteland and fix the water chip, which is basically the main mission in the entire game. At the start of the game, they ask you if you want to go on this mission. You have a yes or no option, and if you select no, it just immediately gives you a game over, says that you stay in the vault until assumedly everyone dies, and sends you back to the main menu, which which is just hilarious, but it does give you freedom of choice and a realistic outcome to your choices. Two key game and design choices that the creators of the original Fallout wanted to create the game with. But perhaps it's not very game-like and can be seen as a waste of the player's time, which is most likely why it was cut from the original game. So the Spinebreaker was an unused type of super mutant that was somewhere between a regular grunt and a behemoth. But this Spinebreaker type was never used, and instead we had regular super mutants, brutes, masters, overlords in the DLC, which are perhaps inspired by Spinebreakers, and behemoths. But no actual Spinebreakers. The super mutant invasion of Aditum. So in the original Fallout game, Aditum is a town that at one point basically hosts a fight between two groups, the Regulators and the Blades. But they were never invaded by the super mutants. However, there is actually evidence of a cut NPC that watches over the town of Aditum after a super mutant invasion, implying that at some point in the game, Aditum would have been invaded by the super mutants and the Cathedral of the Atom. But this wasn't in the final patch of the game, and so we will likely never know. New Vegas post-game. So Fallout New Vegas finishes as soon as you complete the main storyline, without the option to play the game anymore. This decision was apparently intentional by the developers, as they said due to the narrative structure they told, they wanted the finishing of the game to feel more final, and not for you to just finish the game, make these huge decisions, and then just jump back into the game and interact with people as if the massive stuff that you just did no longer mattered. I mean, they say this is the reason for it, but it did annoy a few players and could once again be evidence of Obsidian biting off more than they could chew and just not bothering to come up with content that could be explored after the game was finished. And due to their track record, I'm probably going to go with that answer. Radioactive tumbleweeds. So in New Vegas, you were actually able to encounter these radioactive tumbleweeds. They just rolled around, got stuck on things, as tumbleweeds tend to do, but they were radioactive, emitting a glow similar to the glowing ghouls in the game. And they were pretty cool, but seemingly pretty annoying if you were just chilling there minding your own business and a fucking tumbleweed rolls by and starts irradiating you. But they were cut from the game, so all we have now are regular tumbleweeds, but they still would have been cool, I think. Lucky 38 Executive Override. So this was a cut quest from Fallout New Vegas, where you could bug Mr. House's security system so that the followers could spy on him. And some of the clues about this quest's existence were actually left in the game, such as these various terminals you can actually find around the game, with the option Lucky 38 Executive Override. You can actually re-implement these with certain mods, go find all of these secret terminals, activate them all, and with this, gain access to a secret room in Lucky 38. But it is not in the base game, sadly. Killing Kasumi Nakano. So in Fallout 4, Kasumi Nakano is a mechanic character who has taken refuge in Acadia. She strangely believes that she is actually a synth or a robot, but has no actual real way of telling, as synths are incredibly lifelike. But she can't remember a lot of her childhood, and she has these dreams about electrical shocks on her head, and lying down on a white table in a white room with loads of scientists looking over her. So she could very well be a synth. But although you can never actually kill her in-game, as she is marked as essential for the DLC's quest, you can in fact kill her with console commands. And when you do, you instantly fail the quest, and you unlock this new dialogue with the dad, implying that at some point you are actually able to kill her, but you would fail the quest and you wouldn't be able to complete it. So I guess the developers just wanted you to actually play through the DLC and not kill her and then waste the entire quest in the DLC. So they marked her as important and removed the ability to kill her. The Blades Rippers Gang War. So in Fallout 1, the Rippers are this ultra-violent, sadistic gang that were known to fight with the Blades. They were actually planned to appear in the game as being big rivals for the Blades, but they were for some reason removed, with their entire hideout being replaced by the Deathclaw house. It kind of fits the lore in a way, as the Rippers were actually wiped out by the Deathclaws, but it's still unknown as to why they were removed from the game entirely, like mentions and all. Maybe they were just too sick and violent, which, I mean, honestly, look up some of their quotes. They they are unhinged. The S-lanters, or slanters, I'm not really sure which, but these were these wild, intelligent, mutated raccoons that were a result of exposing raccoons to the same virus that created super mutants, the FEV. And I mean, just looking at them, I don't know whether to cuddle them or to kill them. A few raccoons escaped from these experiments and traveled northwest until they discovered an oasis and started a settlement of their own. This settlement was called the Burrows, and they became skilled hunters and slowly actually got more and more intelligent as time went on. They eventually named themselves the Tribes of the Slanter, or S-Lanter, actually forgetting that they were once raccoons. A really cool animal slash creature that really honestly should have been either kept in the game or reintroduced into future games. They're literally like Rocket from Marvel. The Den residential area was a cut area from Fallout 2 in the Den. Normally when you enter the Den, you're able to spawn on either the east or the west side. But if you know a secret little code to type in, it's 3. Like literally just press the number 3. If you do this while you're loading in, you will instead spawn in the residential area that was cut from the game. This is basically an undeveloped, unused map that would have been explored as part of a quest, but it was scrapped early in development. This area is mostly devoid of well, anything. And it does have a few NPCs walking around, but when you talk to them, they just return an error message. Cut Caesar's Legion content. So in Fallout New Vegas, Caesar's Legion is one of the factions that you can explore. And originally, there was a lot more planned for Caesar's Legion, including quests, extra dialogue, extra backstory and lore, and things such as Joshua Sawyer said that he had planned to fully flesh it out, and for the Legion to initially be seen as evil, just as the NCR was initially seen as good. But as you would explore each side, you would eventually come to the conclusion that each side is more grey than you at first thought, which is a really cool storytelling method that I'm always on board with, but once again, it was cut due to, you probably guessed it, time and resource constraints. Thanks, Obsidian. Tier 6. Fan theories and creepy pastas. Rex is better at sex than Benny. So in Fallout 2, there is this hidden calculation that the game uses to figure out your sex rating and award you certain reputations based on your sexual prowess. Here is the equation in case you want to do your own calculations. But someone made this spreadsheet which compares basically all of the characters in Fallout with another character in Fallout, Benny. And there are some very absurd characters in this list that actually rate higher than Benny in sexual prowess. One of which being Rex the Cyber Dog. So yeah, I don't know about this one. The Chosen One starts Fallout 1. So in a random encounter in Fallout 2, the Chosen One actually goes back in time to a vault. And in order to get back to the normal game, you need to interact with a water chip, which subsequently breaks, and then you get a message saying that you feel like whoever lives down in this vault has at least around 150 days of water left, which is apparently comforting to you. This, I think, highly implies, whether it's canon or not as it is a random encounter, that the Chosen One is in fact the reason that Fallout 1 essentially starts. As in Fallout 1, the whole point of the game is that the water chip breaks, and you've got to go out on an adventure and fix it. But a very cool one, I think. Experimental plant is Nernroot. So in Fallout 4, you can find this experimental plant called NRT-0001 that closely resembles the Nernroot from the Elder Scrolls series, which is, as we mentioned before, another Bethesda game. And they have apparently denied that this is the same plant, which, I mean, maybe it's not, but it's an interesting similarity. And honestly, the amount of Easter eggs and callbacks in Fallout is just insane. And I haven't even listed all of them in this iceberg. Fallout 3 Numbers Station. So this was a myth and creepypasta spread around the Fallout community involving the Three Dog radio station. Apparently, if you kill Three Dog and then travel in-game to a very, very high point, like a mountain or something, sometimes, in rare circumstances, the radio station will turn back on, with Three Dog just broadcasting a series of numbers, as well as Morse code messages. These messages were apparently decoded by members of the community, which apparently worked out to be entire chunks of text, like, I can't believe they've actually done it. Not long left. The noise. I can't take the noise anymore. I have a pistol in the attic. And the Queen has died today. The world mourns, as on days like this, we are all Brits. Pretty strange and pretty creepy. And this is all based on these real-life numbers stations that were used actually quite a bit in the Cold War in order to send messages to sleeper agents all around the world. But its existence in Fallout 3 has been, for the most part, debunked. So for now, this just remains a creepypasta. And in case you've never heard the term creepypasta, it's basically just internet terminology for a creepy story. The Lone Wolf Radio was this abandoned trailer filled with broadcasting equipment in Fallout New Vegas. It was likely used to host a pirate radio broadcast before the war, then the host of which just went crazy and eventually died. The trailer is filled with electrical equipment and supplies and stuff like empty whiskey bottles and shot glasses, with the phrase "everyone is gone, I am all alone, let it all end" being painted on the inside of the trailer. There were also some wild internet theories regarding this, one being a potential quest that was cut from the game. In the quest, there would be a guy broadcasting from this trailer, and each day he would broadcast himself killing a kid. If you listen to this broadcast, it basically started the quest, and then you were able to go and try and find him and either kill him or join him. This was, however, never confirmed, and when Josh Sawyer, the project director and lead designer, was actually asked about this, he said that that was completely made up by the community, and they never had any plans for the trailer to house either a character or a quest. Still pretty eerie though. Pink paste and pink slime. This is a reference to the real-life pink paste, which is often used in fast food. This is just pulverized, reconstituted, blended offcuts of meat with spices and preservatives, etc. added, which is then pumped into little shapes, breaded, and served to fast food customers. It's honestly pretty gross, so look it up if you want to. But there is actually a pink paste in Fallout that is said to be cheap, delicious, provide the consumer with all essential nutrients, and last for hundreds of years. You can find it in-game, served at the Suffolk County Charter School, as it was implemented as a cheap pre-war food, primarily being pushed out to schools. But it was found to be actually quite addictive, and basically taste either horrible or completely of nothing, and it leads to increased aggression, which is fucking just perfect for school lunches apparently. And there are actually ghouls that you can find in-game who have been consuming this paste and have turned pink as a result. Also, the paste bleeds when you shoot it, so yeah, pretty gross. Dogmeat is immortal / a synth. So Dogmeat is everyone's favorite doggo character. And there is a popular theory that Dogmeat is either immortal or a synth, due to his ability to survive apparently unsurvivable events and conditions that would normally be fatal, especially for a dog. For example, in Fallout 1, Dogmeat supposedly dies. Spoilers, I know. But when you recruit Dogmeat in Fallout 2, you present him with a Vault 13 jumpsuit from Fallout 1. Which he apparently takes a liking to. So it's kind of implied that it's the same dog. And there were also some offhand comments from the studio director that say that Dogmeat, like the player, are trapped out of time, whatever that means. And regarding him being a synth, this would also explain his increased lifespan and durability, as well as his seemingly heightened intelligence and perception in the game. This isn't confirmed or canon, and what it actually means has yet to be explained, but I kind of like it, and I think it adds a nice amount of depth and mystery to an already quite lovable little doggo. The Lonesome Drifter is the mysterious stranger's son, so this is an interesting piece of lore between these two characters. The Lonesome Drifter, a traveling musician you can meet in New Vegas, and the mysterious stranger, a recurring character that sometimes appears in combat and helps you out with his magnum before vanishing into thin air. The stranger is quite a bit older than the Drifter, and the stranger is quite suave, bit of a traveler, so it's not unreasonable to think that he may have had a son that either he didn't know about or that he just didn't stick around for. The Drifter also mentions that his father was a mysterious man, a stranger to the family, and the Drifter carries around a unique 44 Magnum and his guitar, both of which were left behind by his father. The mysterious stranger also has a unique Magnum, and if you get a hold of the Drifter's Magnum, whenever you holster or wield it, it will play the same little guitar chord that is played when the stranger shows up. Also, as a last bit of evidence, Josh Sawyer, the lead designer of the game, says that he wished that they actually had time to code into the game, that if you tried to use the VATS in-game to kill the Lonesome Drifter, that the mysterious stranger would show up and kill you instead. So yes, this is for the most part confirmed, although not officially. And also, as an extra little tidbit, you're actually able to get the mysterious stranger's magnum only using console commands, but this magnum deals up to 9,000 damage, which is just absolutely insane and makes it basically the most powerful weapon in the entire game. No Bark Noonan is the chosen one. So in New Vegas, No Bark Noonan is this old kind of kooky character that you meet that has these wild conspiracy theories and crazy statements. And one fan theory is that Noonan is actually the same character that you play as in Fallout 2. The age kind of lines up, and it wouldn't be impossible, but there honestly isn't a ton of evidence for it outside of some speculation and outside of some lines that Noonan gives that some people interpret as being linked to the events of Fallout 2, but the connection is a little flimsy and it's never really been confirmed in-game or out. Still a fun one to think about though. Vault Boy is checking how close he is to a bomb. So this one kind of blew my mind when I read about it. Vault Boy, this little fella, is all over the Fallout franchise, winking and giving a friendly, supportive thumbs up. But what if that's not what he was doing? In many modern hazmat courses, it is taught that if an attack or explosion or whatever else occurs, if it can't be covered up fully by an outstretched thumb, then that means you are too close. So what do you do when a bomb drops? You see the explosion or the mushroom cloud, you outstretch your arm, extend your thumb, and close one eye to line them up. And that looks a little familiar. Now, it's never actually been officially confirmed that this is what he's doing. I mean, he might just be a genuinely cheery, happy, positive mascot, but this is actually something that makes sense to me and is taught in modern day courses. So, at least in my headcanon, this is confirmed. The Brotherhood of Steel and Knights Templar. This is just a reference between the two groups, the Brotherhood of Steel from the Fallout universe and the Knights Templar from our universe. They both have religious dedication and ranks, they both have scribes and knights, and they both have incredible tech and knowledge for their time. And the Knights Templar did actually exist in the Fallout universe, as a cut character from Fallout 1 actually references them, saying how similar they are to the Brotherhood of Steel. But maybe the character was cut because the reference was too on the nose, and in my eyes it's either possible that the developers were inspired by the Knights Templar when they designed the Brotherhood of Steel, or the characters in game and founders of the Brotherhood were inspired by the Knights Templar, or they are literally just a direct continuation of the Knights Templar. I certainly think it's possible. Caesar has no power, so I had to go quite deep into this one to find anything about it, but I think what this entry is likely referring to is the fact that Caesar isn't really as powerful as he thinks. He's relatively old, in his 50s, he has a brain tumor, he has a bunch of enemies, meaning that he honestly might die or be dethroned at any point in time, and he likely doesn't actually control as much land as he'd like us to believe. The Legion also would likely do just fine without Caesar, as you can see if you follow the Usurp Caesar line of events. The Legion controls much the same amount of land that they controlled before Caesar's usurpation. Is that even a fucking word? And they seem to run just as well as they did before. So I think it's certainly possible that Caesar is in fact a lot less powerful than he or any of his subordinates actually believes. Psychic powers in the Fallout universe. So this was a very interesting topic to dive into, involving characters with psychic powers in the Fallout universe. These are people often exposed to the FEV, but not always. Some are exposed to radiation of other kinds, or some, like in the case of Lorenzo Cabot, are utilizing an ancient or alien piece of tech. And these psychic abilities honestly vary quite widely, from fortune telling and telepathy to mind reading, communicating via the mind, communicating with animals, pyrokinesis, photokinesis, and telekinesis, with some like the Master being able to crush a man wearing power armor to death if they get too close to him, which that is a powerful psychic. So a pretty cool little in-universe bit of lore. It's largely unexplored and unexplained, so the creative possibilities are still I think, very wide open on this one. Haley went through the ritual of the Mother Seed. So Haley is one of the locals around Point Lookout in the Fallout 3 DLC. And his story is that he just woke up one day in the store that he's currently in, and he doesn't remember anything about his past, including his name. Haley is just the actual name of the store sign, so he made the store his home, took the name Haley, and has just been working as a shopkeeper and merchant ever since. But while it's never stated explicitly, there is a local ritual that you can actually go through, called the Ritual of the Mother Seed. Basically, you harvest these seeds from this giant ponga plant, at which point pollen is released and you go on this massive hallucinogenic trip. You wake up, who knows how much later, and find a big scar on your now shaved head. It's later revealed that Toby the ferryman actually extracts a small piece of brain from people who do the ritual, which firstly is insane, by the way, but it sounds familiar. I mean, you didn't experience amnesia, at least not that we know of, but it's not unreasonable to think that someone would go out and do the ritual, have a bit of their brain removed, causing them to have amnesia. So they wake up in a shop and take the name Haley. As I said, this has not been confirmed in-game, but I think the theory makes complete sense, and sort of hints at and explains a bit of Haley's origin. Tier 7. Obscure and Grand Scheme Theories. The mysterious stranger is Mark. So the mysterious stranger is obviously mysterious. And as we've explored in earlier entries, people have come up with a bunch of theories about who he actually is and where he actually came from. One theory is that he is a fairly minor character in Fallout 1, Mark. So in Fallout 1, there is a story told that 4 people go down into the Mariposa military base, Mark being one of them, Harold and the Master being 2 others, and the 4th guy, well, the 4th guy just died, so nobody really talks about him. But the Master and Harold both go on to be quite powerful, important mutants, and Mark just kind of disappears. Is it possible that he could have been affected by the airborne forced evolutionary virus and obtained immortality and powerful abilities as a result? Yes. I mean, there are a ton of obviously weird specific flaws and criticisms about this theory. One being something that we mentioned in an earlier entry, that the mysterious stranger is the lone drifter's dad. And as you may know from super mutants, everything exposed to the FEV ends up becoming infertile. Except that's not quite true. Deathclaws, for example, are a result of FEV exposure, but they can in fact produce offspring. In addition to that, in this proposed theory, the 3 original adventurers that went down into the military base form sort of a triad. You have Harold, who is good and speech-based, the Master, who is evil and combat-based, and then the mysterious stranger, or Mark, who is neutral and stealth-based. Pretty cool theory. It has its flaws, but as they say, never let facts get in the way of a good headcanon. The scientists were the test subjects in Vault 111. So in Fallout 4, Vault 111 is the vault that you start the game in. You and a bunch of others went into the vault before the bombs dropped. You were cryogenically frozen, and then 200 years later, you wake up and then go out into the wasteland. But while you were frozen, the scientists who were in charge of monitoring you were set to be evacuated after a certain amount of time. But that time never came. For some reason, no communication was ever sent to release these scientists, and so eventually the overseer of the vault ended up locking everyone in, and they all basically just starved to death. Was this failed evacuation intentional? Was there ever actually any plan to release the scientists? Was this research they were doing real, or was it just a cover to disguise the actual experiment? Nobody really knows. And forgive me for this detour, but this kind of reminds me of a story beat that was told in Lost, the greatest TV series ever, by the way, and also some spoilers if you haven't seen it yet. But basically, in Lost, there are these hatches. You can think of them like vaults. And in one of those hatches, these people have to basically press a button every 108 minutes to keep the world from ending, or so they're told. And there's this other hatch that has cameras in the first hatch, and they are told to write down everything that the people in the button hatch are doing, like everything. Keep track of their entire day in extreme detail. Then their notebooks full of notes get sent up into the main base and are presumably processed and documented, except this isn't what happens. The tubes that they're sending the notes up through just get dumped on the jungle floor and are never read by anyone. So it seems like the entire experiment isn't on the people pushing the button, but rather is on the people taking the notes, seeing if they would sit there all day every day taking notes on these other people just because they were told. So with that same comparison, it could be argued that these scientists with the cryo chambers were actually the ones being experimented on to see how these sane, intelligent, rational people would react to being locked in a vault with dwindling food supplies. It's certainly possible, and it wouldn't be the most messed up experiment that Vault-Tec arranged, not by a long shot. Boone killed Carla at the sniper's nest. So in Fallout New Vegas, Boone is this military character with a pretty dark backstory, and one of the dark things that has happened in his backstory is he ended up mercy killing his pregnant wife with a sniper rifle as he was somewhere watching her down below basically be captured and sold into slavery, and doing apparently the only thing he thought that could save her and her child from a life of suffering in slavery. He took aim and fired. And it's never actually confirmed in the game, but there's this place called Sniper's Nest, which could possibly be where Boone shot his wife from, watching the entire exchange up here on this hill. At the nest, you can actually find a very hard locked case that contains the unique Gobi campaign scout rifle, which again, some people think is the actual rifle that Boone used during the shooting. Pretty dark one, but it does make a lot of sense when you think about it. Lorenzo Cabot's expedition. So this is a part of the lore which is just wild to me, and it's super fascinating to delve right into, especially when you contrast it with the whole post-apocalyptic wasteland setting. Lorenzo Cabot was a pre-war citizen, born in 1835, some 450 years before the events of Fallout 4. He was a talented archaeologist with an interest in ancient civilizations, and so when the opportunity came up, he went with his partner on a secret expedition to a desert in the Middle East to find the lost city of Ubar. And find this lost city they did. As well as the city, they found this whole underground structure containing, amongst other things, non-human remains and artifacts. Now, non-human can be like anything, right? It could be a fucking camel, or a goat, or a shrew, or a leptictidium. I think they're extinct. But I think it's kind of implied that they were aliens. Anyway, among the things found down in this ancient city was this mysterious crown, which Lorenzo took from the site, began wearing, and from it attained vast knowledge of this civilization. Oh, and immortality. Yeah. Fucking immortal alien crown. He left in a hurry, buried the city, and returned to Boston a replenished man. He was obviously no longer aging, he was stronger, faster, healthier, and even now had psychic abilities, such as telekinesis. But he also became more psychotic, more paranoid, and more violent, which led to him committing numerous horrific crimes, and he was eventually locked down in the basement of an insane asylum. But the helmet couldn't be removed, as it had now fused itself to Lorenzo. So his son, eager to find out what this artifact was and what its effects were, naturally studied his dad, took some of his blood, and from these samples, the family produced a serum, which they still use to this day to keep themselves alive as well. So the whole family is basically immortal, all while keeping the father locked in the basement of this insane asylum. Pretty dark, but super interesting, and also immortal alien tech is pretty cool. The Far Beyond. In Fallout New Vegas, there is this group of ghouls called the Bright Brotherhood, led by Jason Bright, a sentient glowing ghoul. Their whole mission really is to take their people to this place called the Far Beyond, a place Jason has seen in dreams, and a place so filled with radiation that no humans can possibly live there. And radiation also kind of heals ghouls, so it would be super nourishing to them as well. It's never exactly stated where this Far Beyond is, but there have been quite a few theories as to the potential location. Is it just in the imagination of this crazy ghoul? Is it the sun? Is it the moon? A space station, as there would be a ton of radiation up in space? Or perhaps is it somewhere more local, such as in the desert or the old necropolis? Or the reservation from the cancelled Van Buren game, which was a nuclear testing site in New Mexico. There are many theories as to where and what it might be, so it's a great topic for discussion, and I would honestly love to see your ideas in the comments below. What makes ghouls feral versus non-feral? So in Fallout, there are ghouls. these guys. And of these ghouls, some are feral and some are non-feral. Non-feral ghouls retain their human consciousness and personality, while feral ghouls have lost their minds, go crazy, and go, well, feral. But it's never really explained as to how exactly this happens, or why this change even occurs, as some ghouls turn feral pretty quickly, and some have never turned feral, even after 200 years of being a ghoul. Some think it's the level of radiation exposure, some think it's simply a state of mind, and that those who are strong-willed and calm and content with who they are won't become feral, and some think it's kind of a combination of both, mixed with maybe how lucky you are with your genes. You know, like predispositions towards genetic things. But it's never been confirmed or really explained, so if you have any cool theories, do let me know. Volpez is an intentionally bad spy. So Volpez Inculta in Fallout New Vegas is a spy for the Caesar Legion, and he wears this fox or wolf head while always openly, loudly announcing that he is head of the Frumantari. And that doesn't sound too wise if you were an actual spy. It would make you a pretty terrible spy, actually. And that one theory for this is that Volpez is actually a decoy. Everyone knows where he is, who he is, what he looks like, they can recognize him by his headgear, all of this so that the real head of the Frumantari, the real top secret spy, never gets caught or identified. And I think it's a pretty cool theory that has kind of the usual suspect vibes. Voltec was testing civilians for spaceflight. This is a wild, somewhat reasonable theory that says that Voltec's various experiments, mostly in the vaults, were part of a larger plan to prepare humanity for space colonization. A lot of the experiments in the vaults included stuff like isolation, leadership, scientific research, and in fact just the idea of being locked in a giant metal container with limited food supplies sounds kind of similar to space travel, and something like the cryo chambers from Fallout 4 could have been used to support this space travel. They did actually have bases on the moon, which means they were actually farther along in terms of space technology than we are here in our universe. So it's not as wild a theory as it sounds. The courier is the lone wanderer. So this is a theory that says the courier from Fallout New Vegas and the lone wanderer from Fallout 3 are the same person. The idea that after the events in the Capital Wasteland, the lone wanderer travels west, eventually becoming the courier in the Mojave Wasteland. There are a few minor timeline inconsistencies and a lack of official confirmation for this one, but it is somewhat possible. I just don't see what the point of actually writing this into the storyline or lore would actually be. Jet is Genkum. So we know what Jet is, but Genkum is a wild, insane, real-life substance. Somewhat hallucinogenic. Jet is made basically by getting some raw sewage, fermenting it, and then inhaling the fumes, and this is Genkum. Well, Jet is made from fermented Brahmin dung and is also inhaled and has kind of a similar name. So Jet in the Fallout universe may have been inspired by Genkum, or it could honestly be the exact same substance, which is incredibly gross. When does the timeline diverge? So this is a tricky one that honestly goes very, very deep and far back. The Fallout series is set in an alternate timeline, diverging from our own around the middle of the 20th century. We know this because a lot of the things prior to this are basically identical with our timeline. And around this time, we notice small differences start to occur, which obviously lead to large differences later down the road. The divergence happens sometime after World War II, and among some other things, we know that, for example, the transistor was never invented. The transistor helped us make huge explosions in terms of electrical work, and so in the Fallout universe, they focused heavily on nuclear energy and technology. So it seems like the divergence happened around sometime in the 1940s, except for the fact that the Washington Monument was built in the Fallout universe on a metal skeleton, and in ours, there is no such frame or skeleton. And this was in 1848. So honestly, who really knows how far back this divergence goes, and when exactly it did did actually split from our timeline. Ugqualtoth and ghoulification. So Fallout 3 introduces the concept of Ugqualtoth, a creepy, mysterious, possibly Lovecraftian entity, revered by some as a supernatural ruler and forgotten god. In the Dunwich building, you can find these holotapes of a guy called Jamie who ventures into the building before eventually succumbing to the madness induced by Ugqualtoth and turning into a ghoul. And when you go and explore, you can find Ugqualtoth's obelisk or altar and a large group of ghouls surrounding it, implying that this supernatural being, whatever it is, can actually turn people into ghouls. Now, there isn't enough radiation in the area to turn people into ghouls, which is the only way we know of in the entire Fallout universe to do this. So yeah, this insane, terrifying, supernatural eldritch horror has the power to make people insane, lure them in, and actually turn them into ghouls. A power not seen anywhere else in the entire game. Truly some odd, dark, strange stuff, and definitely one of the scarier places on the map in Fallout 3. And that is all we have time for. I really hope you enjoyed this Fallout Iceberg, and as always, thanks for watching.